Welcome back. This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show Espresso on SABC3. Now, our guest today is a man who sacrificed a great deal for this country in the fight against apartheid. After being exiled to Lesotho in 1976, tragedy struck in 1990, only 3 months after the release of former President Nelson Mandela from prison, when Father Michael Lapsley was sent a letter bomb by the then secret police service, resulting in the loss of both his hands and the sight in one of his eyes. Now, this harrowing experience is retold in his book, Redeeming the Past, and it's an honor to have him here with us. Good morning, Father Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Kate. Great to be here, though it's a bit early, but I'm happy to be here.
It is a bit early, and Father Michael just commented now on the fact that I get to wear shorts to work, which is...
Yes, I'm very envious. I would have myself if I'd known.
But I want to talk about this book. It's really an amazing book. I've had the chance to kind of just browse through it a little bit. I want to start way back in the past. First, about what prompted you to want to be part of the ministry and to take part, or to be a priest?
Well, when I was 4 years old, I had this problem. I couldn't decide when I grew up whether I should be a priest in the church or a clown in the circus. And then when I became a priest, my brother sent me a message, now you've succeeded at both.
Is that what he had to say to you?
But I think in a way, for me, it was a way of taking the call of Christ seriously to follow him. So it was about discipleship.
And then you decided to, I think, to take the call of Christ really to the next level, if I can say so, by moving to South Africa to come and be part of the struggle. What motivated you to do that?
Well, I joined a religious order of the Anglican Church, the Society of the Sacred Mission in Australia. Then in 1973, they said, what do you want to do next? I said, I'd love to go to Japan. They said, that's great. We'll send you to South Africa.
And that's how you did.
But I'd known about South Africa, but nothing had prepared me emotionally for the experience of South Africa. I often say that when I arrived in South Africa, I stopped being a human being. I became a white man, because suddenly every single aspect of my life was decided not by my humanness, but by the color of my skin.
Yeah. And then being in South Africa, you then decided to take up an active role in being part of the struggle. Why?
Well, I suppose in a way I felt that apartheid robbed me of my humanity. It turned me into an oppressor. I didn't want to be an oppressor, I wanted to be human. So for me, joining the liberation struggle was about joining the struggle to recover my own humanity in solidarity with black people who were struggling for their fundamental human rights.
Yeah. And then you were then in 1976 exiled to Lesotho, then you moved to Zimbabwe. Tell me about that experience.
Yes. Well, I was, just after the events of Soweto in 76, I became the national chaplain of Anglican students, and students were being detained, imprisoned, tortured, killed, exiled, and I began to speak out about what was happening to the people for whom I had pastoral care. Then I was expelled, and then I went to Lesotho. Interestingly, Desmond Tutu had just become a bishop there, and so I then went to Lesotho. It was there that I wrote to the ANC and said, the illegitimate government of South Africa has expelled me. I'm asking to become a member of the ANC, and I understand that I'm taking citizenship in a country for which we're still struggling. And that was to be then the next 16 years before I would return to South Africa.
Yeah. And then in 1990, I think when one would have thought that it is all coming to an end after Nelson Mandela had been released. In fact, 3 months afterwards, you received the infamous letter bomb that is retold, and the whole story retold in this book. Could you take us back to that experience, the day and the events leading up to?
Well, of course, you know, with Nelson Mandela being released, the regime said we're going to talk. We all began to relax. Yeah. I was living in Harare. I was about to go to Bulawayo to become a parish priest in a township parish there. I had a farewell party in the afternoon. Came back to my house, and I'd been in Canada for the previous 6 weeks, and there was a whole pile of postage, and there were manila envelopes, and I'd put them aside. And after the farewell party, I opened the magazine, a religious magazine, 2 of them, sent from South Africa. The act of opening the one magazine completed the circuit, and then the bomb went off. And then I lost both my hands and eardrum shattered. And yet, somehow, I felt that God was with me in that terrible, terrible experience.
Wow, amazing! And then you've just turned this whole event around, and it's resulted in you becoming a healer. And there's a certain excerpt out of the book that you'd like to read for us that goes particularly well with what we were talking about just before the break. And I'd like you to please read it for us, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. I mean, last night I was thinking about and actually watching the Paralympics, and I thought, well, why not read a small passage that relates to disability? And you've just been giving this wonderful news about the South African team.
Yes.
And I saw you getting excited as you talked about it. Here's the passage. When people ask me how my hands operate, my normal answer is to say they operate by faith and hope. But actually, they are connected to my shoulders. When I move my shoulder in a certain way, they open, and when I move in another way, they don't. So while they're quite coarse looking, they're actually very finely tuned instruments. In fact, I can type and I can drive a car. What I can and can't do are a bit unpredictable. For example, it's easier for me to drive or use my laptop or cell phone than it is to open the top button of my shirt. But after I returned to South Africa, Archbishop Tutu invited me to dinner, and I was still learning to be effective with my prosthesis. So at that stage, if I was holding a cup with the right one and then tried to do something with the left, there was a danger that it would fall. Sure enough, when Tutu poured coffee into my cup, it slipped, pouring coffee all over the Archbishop. He asked if I wanted to go home, but I said, actually, I would prefer another cup of coffee. Each person's disability has its own uniqueness. This is most obvious concerning facilities. Some years ago, I went to a meeting in Johannesburg that was held at a new conference center. The host looked unusually delighted to see me. I couldn't fathom what their enthusiasm was about until it turned out that the new facility came replete with a disability suite. With great fanfare, they marched me off to it. When we got there and I looked around, it seemed quite ordinary. There was a bed, a chair, and a wardrobe, nothing particularly related to disability. Then they took me to the bathroom. And the one thing that was unusual about it was a hand-held shower. To their dismay, I said, "Would you mind finding me another room?"
Oh, my word. Wow, wow. An amazing book. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and for sharing your story with us. I think we can all, as South Africans, draw so much inspiration from it. And in fact, we're actually going to be giving a chance for you at home to win a copy of Redeeming the Past, My Journey from Freedom Fighter to Healer by Father Michael Lapsley. The competition details are on your screen right now. So do send in those entries and we'll let you know at the end of the show who the winners are.
And it's not too late for people to start buying Christmas presents.
It's not
all
too
their
late.
friends. And family.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Father.
very much.
Really
Great to be
appreciate
here.
it. Stick around. Lots more to come on Expresso.